Okay, great. Welcome everyone. It's still 1 minute before 4 o'clock, but we'll start at 4:02. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to join. I'm sure everyone's getting out of their previous meetings. I will start at 4:02. Everyone, thanks for joining the webinar. We're just going to wait 1 more minute and we'll start shortly just to give people a chance to get in. Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be joining us from today. My name is Andrew Shuttleworth. I'm from Agorize, and so warm welcome to the AirLab ATM Startup Network webinar. This webinar is organized by AirLab and Agorize, and we're looking forward today to tell you about the startup network we have and the opportunities for startups. The AirLab is really a platform designed to help startups engage with AirLab and learn how their technologies can be applied in the field of air traffic management. We're going to learn a lot more about those opportunities today. But first of all, let me give you a quick rundown of the agenda. So first of all, we'll be welcoming Chris Lee. Hi, Chris. Deputy Director of Strategic and Ecosystem Partnerships at AirLab, and he'll be providing an overview of AirLab and the startup network. And then we'll be hearing from Julius Yale, the Director of Starburst, to share more insights and experience with his journey with innovators and startups. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the AirLab Startup Network, how you can get involved and how to participate and what the kind of next steps will be over the coming months. So without any further ado, let me hand over to Chris Lee, Deputy Director of Strategic and Ecosystem Partnerships from AirLabs, to tell us a little bit more. Chris, over
Thanks,
to you.
Andrew.
The floor is yours.
Yep. So let me share my screen. Can I see my screen?
Not yet. There we go. It's coming.
There you go. Okay. So maybe before I start, let me share a video of what AirLab is about first.
Welcome to AirLab. Our journey began as a collaboration between CES and Thales to innovate in the air traffic management domain through the use of open and advanced technologies. That's how AirLab was inspired.
focus is to develop an open ATM system architecture that will be the key enabler to support CAAS and improve ATM efficiency, innovation, and resiliency.
In the Air Lab, we developed proofs of concept designed to enhance air traffic controllers' workflow by leveraging modern technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. A good example is the digital air traffic controller, which uses machine learning generated services to provide air traffic controller assistance in complex and busy environments like final approach for Changi arrivals.
By following the agile methodology, our proof of concepts are designed to ensure we constantly respond to end user preference and focus on developing highly valuable features rapidly.
One of our key proof of concepts is the ATM twin. What we did was to virtually mirror an entire ATM system and to create a digital twin. This enables air traffic controllers to safely innovate, engage in what-if possibilities, and to optimize their workflow. Our ATM twin can display air traffic information on any HMI if it complies with our open ATM APIs.
The system uses public APIs so that stakeholders are able to easily explore and integrate their own technological products on the AirLab Open ATM platform.
By employing an open ATM system architecture, we allow for a collaborative ecosystem of local talents. We also build partnerships with groups of startups, universities, and developers to create synergistic collaborations. In the Starburst Accelerator program, we have also worked with startups on ATM use cases.
And this is only the beginning of our journey in advancing the future of ATM and achieving excellence in ATM operations. Come and join us on this journey.
All right. Hope the video is informative enough, a short video. So let me go on to share the slides to give you more information of what we do in the Air Lab. So Air Lab was based on a collaboration between Thales and CS, as mentioned in the video, where we started back in the late of 2019, just before COVID struck. Then we started with one squad of engineers. We start from scratch in terms of recruiting local engineers, and we get experts from France and Australia to come in to train this group of local talents. Because if you look at Air Lab today, is actually a collaboration to strengthen a very strategic need for Singapore in terms of air traffic management. I don't know how much the audience knows about air traffic management, but essentially, this is a very critical functions that's operated by Singapore, because you can imagine aircraft coming into Singapore and departing from Singapore would require air traffic management to safely guide and to communicate with the pilot to bring them safely to the ground and into the air. And because of that, is one of the Air Hub is one of our economic engine, and air traffic management essentially is a very prized asset of Singapore. And Thales has been supplying Singapore this software tools on air traffic management for 2 decades, starting from Lorex 2 to 3. And the current system is employed by Thales. But as of all air traffic management technologies today is monolithic. So if you want to incorporate or integrate third parties or new capabilities, it's going to take you a while. And as its name says air traffic management, is criticality is on safety. You can imagine that cars can stop when there's something wrong or there's a conflict, but aircraft couldn't. So you can imagine the safety awareness and the type of assurance that we have to give to air traffic controllers to allow them to manage the airspace needs to be very high. And we know that in the future, if you want to integrate advanced technologies to manage more complex airspace by leveraging, say, artificial intelligence that's mentioned in the video, you need to have a very robust kind of a testing method. And today, I always like to use this analogy when you use a Google Home, right? Sometimes it fails. But imagine you use the AI Google Home for air traffic management and it fails. The results could be disastrous. So to us, we need to have a very strong justification environment to test all these technologies and advanced technologies before we want to roll them into operations. This is where Air Lab comes in. We find that open architecture will help us in integrating all these new technologies seamlessly into the next generation of air traffic management. And by discovering these capabilities through a research setting, it allows us to expedite how technologies could be rolled out in air traffic management. Like you said, like I said previously, because it's monolithic, the air traffic management system has been almost the same, and it takes decades for you to integrate and bring in new features into the system. In future, we could not afford to have this kind of slow change in terms of features and functions. That's where we started explore with open technologies. And within the first 6 months of Air Lab's initiation, actually, we set up this open ATM platform with 28 open APIs. That's where we start to interact with startups. And we also will be working with France on the safety assurance and standards of how to bring an open system into the operational state by being secure and safe. And that's why we developed this ATM twin capabilities later on. After the first year, we ramp up from 1 squad to 4 squad, which I'll mention later on, to bring us these capabilities of a twin that can help us simulate or stimulate operational requirements of how an operational system, air traffic management system behaves, which I'll share more later on. Then today we have a joint team of 40 Thales and 12 CAS engineers plus air traffic controllers who are the users of this system who help us innovate in this whole process. Before I move on, Andrew, should I ask for questions or I should leave it to the end?
Yeah, if anyone has questions, I think they can post them in the chats and we'll handle them at the end of the session today.
So I'll go on. Okay, so after the first year, essentially we brought in more domain experts into Singapore, which are ATM experts from France and Singapore, to help us with this training and set up of the air traffic management domain knowledge, know-how to these local engineers. And the proof of concept are co-developed between Thales and CAS in this whole process. We have the engineers and from CAS and Thales being able to access to the same development tools and environment that's provided by Singapore's Thales Digital Factory. So a bit on this history. Thales has our own digital journey, transformation journey, where we set up digital factories around the world. Today we have 3, one in Canada, one in France, and the third one is in Singapore, which was set up in 2018. So before Air Lab was set up, we already have this infrastructure environment to help us develop our tools that we use in terms of cloud technologies. And today we employ most of the functions and tools that we use from the Thales Digital Factory to enable what we're doing. And the POCs, like I mentioned, are defined in collaborations with the controllers through iterative workshops, so that whatever we have developed in the Air Lab will remain useful for them in their operations. Then the other part or functions of the Air Lab is that we also want to develop proof points, how to show that it's open. That's why we constantly engage startups and third parties or the ecosystem in Singapore to test out their capabilities and how to bring them on board on the air traffic management platform. That's where Julius will later on share with you some of the collaborations we've done with them. Because of COVID, it's very hard for us to continuously engage startup face-to-face during 2020 and 2021. So what we do is that we leverage industry experts like Starburst and Agarize, who have a network of startups, to help us reach out to you guys to share what we are doing in air traffic management. Because to be fair, air traffic management is actually very niche domain. You probably heard about ATM as an auto teller machine more than air traffic management. So I think this is what we need to do today to share with you what we are doing. If you have any questions after this session, please feel free to reach out to us and we can share with you more. And last but not least, we are also working on green aviation topics, because this is the part of sustainable aviation that we are contributing to, using air traffic management to help reduce the CO2 emissions that we're contributing in the aviation domain. Hope this is an informative session for you. I'll pass it on to Julius and then Andrew to share more with you.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we do have the chat. We do have a Q&A tool as well, so please post your questions in there and we'll address them at the end. But moving swiftly on, it's my pleasure to invite Julius Yale, who's the director of Starburst, to share his experience working with startups, so that you really get a sense of how this could work for you. Julius, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Chris, for inviting me for this sharing opportunity. So Starburst, I think we are an innovation catalyst within the aviation and aerospace industry. We have been an innovation partner of Air Lab, I think since 2 years ago, where we work with Air Lab on use cases that are relevant to the air traffic management domain. I think a lot of audience are the startup, and you'll be asking yourself, why do you want to work in the air traffic management domain? All right. So I think for once is for startup that are fundraising at the moment, I think certainly winter has come. All right. definitely you have a hard time raising funds. And there are a lot more startups that are coming up from universities, from aspiring entrepreneurs as well. But what I would advise, and as a global accelerator, as well as a VC, what we advise startups to actually build on strong fundamentals. So there are two pockets. Probably you will know that consumer tax valuation has come down a fair bit, all right? But what we are seeing here is deep tech has actually gained momentum. Their valuations are still strong because they are serving very niche industry applications. So in this specific example, air traffic management will be a very strong case for aspiring startup to actually participate in this air traffic management with the journey with AirLab in a co-collaboration manner. So I highly encourage aspiring startup that are there, sitting on the fence, to continue to engage AirLab to participate in the air traffic management domain. All right. But however, in the deep tech domain, it's actually a journey to begin with. Firstly, I think the startup would need a lot of commitment, a lot of resources as well, to actually be able to explore working on use cases in the air traffic management domain. However, there are silver linings within these industries. As Chris has earlier pointed out, I think some of the use cases that they work on are very robust, very critical in nature. Hence, technologies that are supporting this particular domain are probably the best in class. So with this mindset, I think entrepreneurs or founders have to think long-term, to actually participate in this. But once I think you are the winner, or you are able to contribute as part of the ecosystem to the air traffic management domain, I can guarantee you that I think you will be able to have a very strong footings, especially in terms of your business fundamentals. Again, as I share, there are a lot of startups competing for the similar pie, but startup would need to actually find their niche. And I think air traffic management is actually a very niche applications that startup I would encourage startups to actually look into this. All right. Starburst our journey on the Singapore Aviation Program. So when we brought startups to actually address the use case for AirLab, necessarily we follow through the entire process of having an MVP, basically providing a minimum viable product to showcase to the AirLab team, and then followed by the POC, proof of concept, and eventually said if there's a possibility of going commercialization. All right, so startup have to bring this mindset of it's a phase curation approach where we work with the air traffic management team to actually build the confidence. The other side of the spectrum, what we are also seeing is actually the dual use applications. A lot of time we are seeing, for example, tech companies within the weather domain. They might be applicable, say, for example, in the maritime, in the space, for example. So this segment of startup may be applicable for the air traffic management industry. This is where it also makes sense for this startup to actually, which are already addressing some of the existing use cases, to expand on new existing use cases in the air traffic management domain. All right. So I encourage the aspiring startups to actually think horizontally and also commit to the air traffic management, because once you are in, you're probably seen as a gold class within, I think, this the tech capability side. And as a result, I think you have a strong tech, you're able to raise funds, you're able to scale, you're able to succeed. All right. So that's all I need to share. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Julius. Before we jump over to questions, just let me quickly talk about the network as well. Yep. So the purpose of setting up the network was, as Chris and Julius have described, this is a very complex area, And so we wanted to kind of give people time to connect with our lab, to learn a little bit more about what they do, and really open the discussion to see whether your technologies can apply in this domain. So rather than a typical challenge where there's very specific problem statements, we wanted to open this up over a period of time to give people really to kind of express their interest and reach out to our lab. So we kind of know what the goals are. It's how can you contribute to the future of air traffic management? How can you potentially apply your technologies there? And as we described, it's heavily supported by Thales and the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore, so it is well backed. We'll talk a little bit more about the support and how they'll work with you in the Q&A. So just skipping on to the next slide. The challenge areas, we've kind of split up into the kind of key challenge areas where we think, or sorry, the three themes that we think can be potentially addressed. So we have artificial intelligence. We know there's a lot of AI startups out there doing a lot of cool things. How can that be applied in air traffic management? Cybersecurity, digital twin, which was covered a little bit in the video earlier. Sustainability. We know that airplanes do emit a large portion of things into the atmosphere, and if we can reduce that, all the better. And then of weather prediction. So moving on to the next slide as well. So here's the timeline. We opened it up in October, and we're kind of keeping the reach out phase open until April. So the application phase open until April. So as you register, as your submissions come in, we will be looking at those. There may on occasion be an opportunity for us to reach out and kind of get more clarification. But the key period when we'll be reaching out is between April and June next year. So feel free to, at the moment, register on the platform. And then as it gets close to the deadline, you can kind of submit more information. You can go back in there and edit that at any time. And then towards June, we'll kind of announce those startups that we've decided to work with more closely over the next few months. So going on to the next one. Okay, so just covering the benefits again, we've already covered that you'll be working with two world-class leaders in this space, and you have the potential to change a system that's been, as Chris said, has been a system in place for 20 plus years. It's also a great opportunity for you to make connections and network with people in the industry. We are hosting more webinars and fireside chats coming up over the coming months over the course. So if you're still not sure, you're interested to learn more, maybe hear more example use cases, then join us for our future webinars. The good thing about our lab is they have a lot of live air traffic data. We know that in order to test your technology or maybe just investigate further, you need real lifelike data to work with, and that is made available by our lab. And in the future, we may organize more kind of specific challenges with specific problem statements. If you're registered on the Startup Network, you'll be the first to hear about those. Great. So how easy is it to get involved? It's very easy. The Startup Network is running on the Agorize platform, so you can simply go to airlab.agorize.com, or you can follow the QR code here. The initial registration form is very simple. I'll just keep that on for a few more seconds, but it's pretty easy to remember. airlab.agorize.com. Just give people a chance to access that. We can pop that up again later if needed, or maybe post it in the chat, but let's go on, and I'll just show you quickly the registration procedure. So up at the top of the page, you can see create an account. We keep this very simple, just put in information about you there, about you and your startup there. That will be your login to the platform going forward. And then the next step is actually submitting. So you can register in one step, and then you can go in and submit your materials later. And at any point, you can go in and edit your materials. I'll just show you that on the next screen as well. Yeah, once you're logged in, you'll see a blue participate button there. Then you'll be able to go in and you'll see a very nice and user-friendly form where we just learn a little bit more about your startup. We're trying to keep this as easy as possible for people to express their interest at this stage. So it shouldn't really take you long to put your information in there. So if you do have any questions about this process, about the network as well, feel free to post those into the chat, but I'm going to move over to Q&A now. And so if you haven't had a chance to ask your question yet, please do so. Let me pull up, we've got quite a few questions already. So Chris, first of all, the first question is, what kind of support or resources will AirLab be able to provide to the startups?
Thanks, Andrew. Actually, we are answering this based on our experience, our past experience in terms of the needs from the startups. I mean, generally, what the process is, the startup will provide us with a proposal in terms of what they are thinking about to work with us on. Then we go through a few iterations to finalize and smoothen the whole concept and the resources before we usually what we have done in the accelerator program with Julius is that we have these mentorship sessions. Usually we'll time it to something that is short to do a simple proof of concept to first prove that it's viable in that sense. And to both sides, I think it's fair to startup and AirLab as well that we don't put in all our resources at the same time before we commit ourselves towards this collaboration. Just do small steps, prove a small POC, and once it works, we are actually in the midst of also talking to a startup through this whole process to give them a paid POC in the sense to do something more, a bigger piece of demonstration. Then I think in the future runs, we have plans to, following this POC stage, we want to build out this marketplace where we can host all the startups together. And you know, we are in a research setting. Thales is one of the leaders in air traffic management in the world. So we have a lot of customers worldwide. What we can do is that we can give access of this startups solution to all our customers. For instance, in Thailand, if you have a use case on a weather that we have done in Singapore, then we could deploy the same solutions that you have proved in our setting in Singapore over in Thailand.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, this is just getting started, but huge potential here. I know I used to work for a startup, and the opportunity to work on an area like this would have been really valuable. So yeah, pretty exciting. So I have one question about the process and timeline after we make a submission. I've kind of covered the general timeline. I may ask you for any comments, Chris, but just to kind of reiterate on that. The initial timeline is a submission or registration period up to April, and then the core review period will be April to June, and then announcements after June. But do you want to add anything to that process, Chris? Or
yeah, I think Andrew, we need not be so. We will be more flexible in our process and transparent. I mean, to be transparent to you guys, we'll be looking at all these submissions either weekly or daily in terms of the platform. And as and when we pick up a proposal that's interesting, we could actually engage you and start the discussion straight away. So once you're ready, please don't hold back in putting up your proposal on the platform because we will be monitoring, and this will speed up the whole process of engagement. And like I mentioned previously, what we have done in the past is actually from Thales and CAS in deducing the use cases and challenges and push it out for proposal to the startup. But we feel that this is a bit short. And this time around, what we're trying to do is to do reverse innovation in terms of what I told Andrew. If you have a solution, if you have something that you think that will be helpful for air traffic management, feel free to post us your questions, your query, your proposal, and we can refine it from there. I think this is where we are very receptive towards new ideas on the platform. So this is quite a transparent process and flexible. So that the timelines are to guide you, but it's not there to restrict you in engaging us.
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so if you do want to get in touch with Chris, what you can do is just create an account on the platform. Once you have an account on the platform, then you'll be able to reach out and contact the administrators, and that's where the engagement will go on. So feel free to even go and do that now as we're talking, if you like. But thanks for flexibility there, Chris. I know for startups, every week is like a year, and time is money. So I appreciate your flexibility and proactivity there. So the next question is, can you talk a little bit more about the challenges with the current air traffic management systems and maybe what you envision for the future?
Thanks, Andrew. Like I shared earlier on, I think what we have currently in terms of a global solution for air traffic management system is largely monolithic. What it meant is that it's proprietary, it's locked in to a certain vendor, it's not open in that sense. What we're trying to do in the Air Lab is to have an open system that can flexibly interact with third parties with ease. That's why we have APIs that's developed in the Air Lab that will help to exchange and interrogate data between ourselves and our partner. And Andrew raised a good point, which I missed out just now, is that we are in the midst of setting up this breach, what we call the secure data breach, to be able to breach operational data to the outside world. So right now, what we have are historical data. They are operational ready, which means operational data or flight plans that are done maybe back in 2019, 2018, things like that. We could use this data to pass through the APIs to allow your capabilities or your functions to pass back certain results to us and see how it displays on the air traffic management system. But I don't want to limit the type of potential. In the past, what we've done, just to give you some idea, is that we've done weather information system, because today, what really sets us apart from the rest of the world is that we are facing very challenging thunderstorm situations. It could be as challenging as stopping aircraft from landing on the runway because of visibility issues. And typically, if you hit that kind of timing between 5 to 7 in Singapore, it's going to be peak hour. And it's challenging because to a certain extent, you have aircraft holding. I think you guys are not unfamiliar to announcement from the pilot saying, oh, sorry, we are unable to land. Air traffic control has mentioned to us that the runway is wet, there's poor visibility, we need to hold on for another 10, 20 minutes or even 30 minutes. These men feel burnt, these men lost time. These are not ideal in today's context where we want to save the world. So what we really want is that if you have a weather information system that's as accurate or more accurate from forecasts from what we already have, this is what we're looking at, giving this solution onto the platform to help the controllers better manage aircraft from taking off from the adjacent airports. And the other part is that we also are looking in the past on air speech recognition, because you know that as the airspace gets more and more complex, the workload of the controllers gets heavier and heavier. It's very difficult to manage airspace and aircraft. If you have an assistant that's digital to tell the controller, say, hey, why do you descend this aircraft to this flight level that will deconflict is a future flight path with other aircraft, that would be ideal. Or you have something that between the conversation between the pilot and the controller, you can pick up errors that when they communicate and do verification, that will be of good assistance to the controller in reducing their workload. So these are examples that we are really looking at. But what we are looking at today is that something that's really different that you have and you thought about and you could actually propose to us in terms of the solution.
Great, thanks, Chris. I think that ties in a little bit with our next question as well, which is quite a wide question, but let me throw it out there. And someone's looking for you to share what are your expectations are for potential startups. Maybe you could just kind of be more specific, at least at the initial stage, and then maybe further on down the line as well after that initial engagement.
Yeah. What we are really looking at is if today you have a solution that is pretty mature in that sense, not in the development stage, but you have something already that's there to be integrated directly with our APIs, to be able to receive data from our APIs in that fashion. I think this is ideal for us because we can immediately give you some data for you to try. And because our APIs are two ways, we receive and we actually also push out data to you. So what I'm actually requesting is that startups with mature or developed solutions could reach out to us, and perhaps something a bit more greedy is that give us a bit of your take in terms of proposal. How can you help in terms of the air traffic management to help us better manage the space? So what type of data that we can provide to you is actually on our website. You can look at the 28 APIs that we have published on the website, includes flight plans, tracks, and all this type of things that we can push out to you.
Great, thanks, Chris. One practical question here. So in terms of engagement, remote, hybrid, or on-site, are you able to work with people who are not just in Singapore as well?
Yep, definitely. Of course, as far as we want, we are also partially funded by CAS, the step out today, that what they're looking at is really to grow the local ecosystem. So our wish is that after working with us and you test that something that's really a market for you to work on this solution, feel free to set out your base in Singapore and we can support you from here.
Yeah, great. Well, we know from our other activities at Agorize that there's a lot of grants. Enterprise Singapore is very keen on bringing startups to Singapore. That's maybe something we can take offline and support you with as well. But Singapore is a great place to build a regional hub and a tech hub for South Asia, and even down to Australasia as well. So if you are thinking about, if you are in Europe or the US or Africa and you're thinking to bring your startup here, certainly a good opportunity to get your feet on the ground. But I think initially the communication can certainly be remote. Okay, so next question. We've already kind of covered this a bit, but what sort of technologies do you see that can be applied to air traffic management? And I know, Chris, you mentioned that you're also keen just to kind of get new ideas of maybe things you hadn't thought of as well. Is there anything else? And we've talked about weather, we've talked about AI, anything else that you want to throw in there?
Yep, sure. I mean, we do have some ideas, but they are still in the very, I would say, low TRL kind of domain, something like blockchain. I'm not even thinking about IoT because IoT is more hardware in today's context. So we are looking at more software solutions. So you'll be not hard to imagine how AI can be wide. The wide application of AI for air traffic management could be in helping us analyze certain data or trends that's actually in the operational domain. For instance, aircraft landing and taking off numbers and the capacity of the airport in managing a certain amount of traffic, how efficient it is. Like even with data such as weather, today we know that there's thunderstorm, but to what extent of a thunderstorm would you then have a problem for aircraft to land? So we are going into finer and finer details of the data, how we manage it. I would think that the sophistication allow us to explore more sophisticated applications and solutions that AI can provide us with. Then I mentioned blockchain, AI. I don't know about metaverse. We're doing a digital twin, but if you have something that can help us having controllers to manage the airspace in a different way in the future, maybe that is something that we can look at as well. I mean, I'm talking about something that's quite wild in this context.
Great, thanks. Actually, that leads on to the next question as well, which is just maybe can you explain the concept of a digital twin for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, sure. So what we really have done is that we provided this virtual replication of the actual air traffic management system on the cloud. So we broke up certain functions that we need in terms of flight plan, trackers, the usual functions that we have. Then we wrap it out in Kubernetes and containers and have them available on the cloud that can simulate the real operations of the air traffic management system. Itself, if you look at it, by putting the pieces together, we're able to generate scenarios of whether historical, then replay it, or even make up reinforce hybrid simulations on the scenarios to see what if certain situation were to be played back with. This is very helpful for capabilities. So for example, I can think of what we have done is that we are trying to improve the arrival into Changi using continuous descent operations we call CDO. This is the idling of engines so that you allow aircraft to land with minimum fuel burn in that sense. Okay, just broadly speaking. So in the past, what we have done is that we analyze historical data and we feel that certain flight could take on a CDO profile. And what the ATM twin could help us do is that it can project that CDO profile using historical flights inputs then merge with the historical data and simulate the profile for us and give us an estimate of what if you land certain number of flights using a CDO profile. This is the amount of CO2 saving emission you can achieve. So this is one application we can do for the ATM twin. I mean, there are lots of other applications like training. You can inject digital pilot, digital controllers to help with training as well. So these are the various functions and versatility we have for the twin that we are today engaging the various stakeholders to share and to get in more capabilities to be hosted on the twin, actually.
Awesome, very clear. Thanks, Chris. So we just have one question left. Maybe if I float out the last question, just see, Julius, do you have any comments to add based on those questions we've had?
Yes, certainly, Andrew. I think expanding on what Chris has mentioned, I think those advanced tech areas that AirLab is actually looking at, I think would be very interesting for us as a VC and as a deep tech accelerator. As what I mentioned, the fundamental precedes, and hereby I think the value is the startup have access to data, I think, which unlike no other platforms out in the world can do it. So I highly encourage, that's number one. Number two is the startup would really have the chance to actually work with, I think, the best ecosystem partners to actually test whatever technologies that you have developed. Number three is that give us an opportunity to also look into investing in the startup that works with AirLab, and this is our interest areas, and also to localize some of them as well, what Andrew has mentioned earlier. I think that's all my comments, Andrew. I think certainly would be glad to also take a peep at those companies that are working with AirLab for investability. All right.
Awesome, thanks, Julius. This is great. We've got the whole pipeline here from the way to get in touch with our lab, the kind of moving forward to selection and a POC, and then potentially to investments as well. So that's great. I think the last question was how do we get involved with this? And it's pretty simple. Go to the URL below or the QR code if you're on your phone as well. Just simply register on the platform, and the rest will be straightforward. Chris will see your registration and your submission, and then we'll reach out to you to discuss further details. So I think that's all for today. Thanks to everyone for joining. Thanks, Chris and Julius, for your input. This is, again, we're going to be opening the door for a few months here on these particular challenge themes. But it's the start of a long journey, and we hope it's going to be a successful one for some of the startups listening in today. So thanks for joining. Stay tuned for more news over the coming months, and we'll see you soon.